back with us on set now for a look at what she's found in this morning's international press. And Florence, lots of focus on that wave of explosions in Baghdad yesterday.
That's right, getting a lot of attention. Let's start with the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. You can see some photos of the aftermath of one of those bombings. So you can see on the front page, the Islamic State bombs hit Baghdad. There have been bombings almost every day over the past week in and around Baghdad that have killed nearly 200 people. Now, the Daily Beast says that the Baghdad bombings reveal ISIS's new plans. U.S. officials believe the Islamic State group is trying to keep Iraqi forces on the defensive in Baghdad to try and stop them from hitting the Islamic State group in their local capital of Mosul. Now, the Daily Beast says that U.S. officials are calling this wave of bombings an act of desperation, but this could have devastating consequences for Iraq. It could spark more sectarian violence and really tear the country apart.
But people there have taken to the streets in protest against the government.
That's right. I took an article out of Al-Quds. That's a pan-Arab paper based in London. You can see a photo here of demonstrators in Asadra. That's a neighborhood of Baghdad that's been particularly hard hit in the past couple of days. Now, what you can see on these placards they're holding is essentially they're accusing the government of being irresponsible for insecurity in Iraq. They want the government out. They say the government is incapable of fighting the Islamic State group. That being said, protesters say the current security chaos that we're seeing in Iraq right now is actually the fault of the U.S. invasion, which is really responsible for the weak Iraqi government. And on top of that, protesters blame what they call an outside influence from Iran, which has been trying to sway Iraqi politics and policies ever since the U.S. withdrew its troops.
Okay, let's move on to Hong Kong now. And yesterday, Florence, pro-democracy activists staged protests against the visit of that top official from mainland China.
That's right. That is also getting a lot of attention in the press. Once again, if we go back to the Wall Street Journal, you can see a photo of those protests against the visit of Zhang Dejiang, the Communist Party's third highest ranking official. He arrived yesterday for a 3-day visit. It's the first visit by a top Chinese official since pro-democracy Occupy protests really roiled Hong Kong back in 2014. The Wall Street Journal says that police here imposed quite extensive security measures to block those protesters. Really interesting to see how mainland China is covering this 3-day visit. Let's take a look at the editorial of China Daily today, which says that he's on an inspection tour to observe, listen, and speak to all sorts of people, including pro-democracy people. Now, this editorial says whoever speaks with him should take full advantage of this opportunity to present their aspirations for the future of Hong Kong. After all, one cannot listen if no one speaks.
But on the other side of the coin, what are the Hong Kong papers saying?
Well, let's take a look at the South China Morning Post today. In their editorial, you can see they're really calling on pan-Democrats to seize this chance for dialogue with Beijing. It's time to build bridges with the central government. But if we take a look at the political cartoon in the South China Morning Post, you can see they're wondering just how sincere Jiang is about being open to discussion. You can see here a protester talking to a wall of police officers here saying, Mr. Jiang said he'd listen to all sectors of society. And the police chief there saying, well, some sectors are going to have to speak up a bit because he's way back there somewhere.
Okay, let's move on to news coming out of Kenya now. Some disturbing photos and video showing Kenyan police brutally beating and kicking a protester.
That's right. The footage really is quite disturbing. It's getting attention all over the world. I pulled out, first of all, an article here in Le Monde. You can see a screen grab from that scene there. Essentially what you can see is riot police kicking and beating up an apparently unconscious man. This scene took place on Monday on the sidelines of a protest in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Now, essentially, opposition supporters are calling for election reforms ahead of the 2017 presidential election, and so they've been staging these protests. Now, the Kenyan media carried somewhat conflicting reports about the man's condition and even his name, in fact. We can read more about that in the Huffington Post. You can see they're talking about the uncertain fate of the man in this video. Some outlets reported that he was a protester and died from his injuries. Others report that he was actually just a bystander that was caught up in the violence and actually survived from this incident.
Of course, understandably, this has sparked debate there over police brutality.
That's right, a debate online, but particularly the hashtag Stop Police Brutality has really been trending on social media. Let's take a look at this editorial here in The Star. That's a Kenyan paper. They wonder, when is force considered reasonable? The problem in this instance is that all sides are at fault. The police have drawn criticism for the use of unreasonable force, but that being said, protesters as well have been at fault of overstepping their constitutionally guaranteed right to demonstrate peacefully. And this article says, two wrongs don't make a right. And let's just end, though, with a cartoon, which is in The Nation, another Kenyan paper, also very critical, this time of Kenyan authorities, for standing by amid the violence. What you can see here is the president, Uhuru Kenyatta. You can see he's saying, "What brutality? Anyone spreading such malicious lies risk arrest and prosecution." So you can see criticism widespread in the Kenyan media there.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Florence, for that spin through the international press.